Jimmy Stewart, Hollywood's most unlikely war hero. Opening, the morning everything changed. It began on a quiet morning in Beverly Hills, California. March 22, 1941. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across empty streets. Newspapers landed on porches, headlines screaming about war in Europe, about Hitler's armies, about England standing alone. Cafes were opening. Producers were waking up to talk about new movies and new stars. But in one modest apartment, one man was doing something different. James Maitland Stewart, Jimmy to the world, one of Hollywood's most beloved actors, was packing a military suitcase. His hands trembled as he folded khaki shirts and checked the letter from his father that he would carry throughout the war. Tall. 6'3". Soft-spoken. America's gentle hero. The nation knew him as Jefferson Smith from Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the idealistic young senator who stood up to corruption with nothing but his conscience. But that morning, he wasn't going to a movie studio. He was going to war. To fly bombers over Nazi Germany. To face death at 25,000 feet. And that choice would transform Jimmy Stewart from a movie legend into America's most famous bomber pilot. Act 1. The recruit who refused to quit. The decision. Back in 1940, while Europe descended into darkness, Hollywood was experiencing its golden age. Studios churned out escapist entertainment. Actors lived in mansions, drove convertibles. The war seemed far away. But not to Jimmy Stewart. He watched newsreels of London burning. He listened to Roosevelt's fireside chats about the gathering storm. His father, Alexander Stewart, a decorated World War I veteran, had raised him with simple values: duty, honor, service. If your country needs you, his father had told him, you answer the call. No excuses. His agent told him he was crazy. You're at the peak of your career. You'll lose everything. His friends tried to reason with him. Jimmy, actors don't go to war. You entertain the troops. That's how you serve. But Jimmy wasn't interested in half measures. He wanted to fight. Actually fight. The rejection. October 1940. Jimmy Stewart walked into a U.S. Army recruiting office in Los Angeles wearing civilian clothes, a simple suit, a fedora pulled low. He didn't announce himself. He simply waited in line like everyone else. I want to enlist. I want to fly, he said quietly. The recruiter looked up, stunned. You're Jimmy Stewart. The actor. Yes, sir. But today, I'm just an American who wants to serve. They led him to the medical examination room. Height, vision, blood pressure, all checked out. Then came the scale. 138 pounds. For a man 6'3", that was dangerously underweight. The minimum was 148 pounds. Mr. Stewart, I'm sorry. You're underweight. We can't accept you. Rejected. Most men would have given up. But Jimmy Stewart wasn't most men. The transformation. Jimmy became obsessed. He hired a personal trainer and ate 6 meals a day, steaks, potatoes, milkshakes loaded with raw eggs. He lifted weights until his arms shook. He ran miles through the Hollywood Hills. Every morning he stepped on the scale. 139 pounds. 141, 144. His agent begged him to reconsider. You won an Oscar. Why are you doing this? Jimmy's answer was simple, because if I don't fight, what am I acting for? The acceptance. March 22, 1941. Jimmy returned to the recruiting office. Heavier. Stronger. Determined. This time, when he stepped on the scale, the needle climbed to 148 pounds. Exactly the minimum. Well, I'll be damned. You did it. The papers were stamped. Welcome to the United States Army. That day, the Hollywood star disappeared. In his place stood Private James Maitland Stewart, serial number 0 to 433,210. Act 2, Wings of Steel. Flight School. Jimmy didn't get special treatment. He slept in barracks, ate in mess halls, marched in formation, cleaned latrines. The other recruits were wary. A movie star. Probably gonna wash out in a week. But Jimmy proved them wrong. He was up before Reveille, his uniform immaculate. He helped struggling recruits study navigation and meteorology late into the night. Slowly, they stopped seeing him as Jimmy Stewart, movie star, and started seeing him as Jim, that tall guy who's pretty good with a compass. Learning to fly bombers. Mather Field, California. Jimmy trained as a bomber pilot. First on smaller aircraft, then on the real machines, the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-24 Liberator. These weren't sleek fighters. They were massive, lumbering giants, 4 engines roaring with 1,200 horsepower each, weighing 65,000 pounds fully loaded, carrying 10 men and tons of bombs into enemy territory. His instructors were astonished. Stewart's got ice water in his veins. Calm under pressure. Decisive. Natural leader. He mastered formation flying, instrument navigation, and emergency procedures. But most importantly, Jimmy learned to lead, to command, to make life-and-death decisions in split seconds. By late 1942, he earned his wings, Second Lieutenant James Stewart. The letter from home. Before shipping overseas, Jimmy visited home. His father met him at the train station and that evening handed him an envelope. "Don't open it now. Open it when you need it most." Jimmy wouldn't open it until England, preparing for his first combat mission. The letter said, "My dear Jim, soon you will fight for your country. Remember this, if you see danger, walk toward it. Not away from it. Be a leader, not because you want glory, but because men need someone to follow when they are afraid. I'm proud of you, son. Your father." Jimmy carried that letter through every mission. It became his talisman, his reminder of why he was there. Act 3, The Bomber Commander. Arrival in England. November 1943. IF Tybenham, England. Cold, grey, endlessly wet. The airfield was home to the 445th Bombardment Group, 703rd Squadron. Their new commanding officer, Captain James Stewart. Word spread like wildfire. Jimmy Stewart's here. The actor. No way he actually flies. The skepticism was thick. These were farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit, college kids from Boston. They didn't want some Hollywood pretty boy pretending to be their commander. Earning respect. Jimmy understood their doubts. He didn't win them over with charm. He won them over by doing the work. He studied bomber tactics until 3 a.m. He memorized every system in the B-24. He knew the names of every crew member, not just officers, but gunners, radio operators, bombardiers, mechanics. One morning, a young navigator struggled with a celestial navigation problem. Jimmy sat with him for an hour, working through the math patiently. Word got around. Stewart helped Eddie with his star sights. He stayed up all night reviewing tactics. He's actually serious about this. Slowly, the squadron accepted him. Not as a movie star. As their commander. The first mission. December 13, 1943. Target, Kiel, Germany. Submarine yards. Jimmy sat in the left seat of a B-24 Liberator, call sign 9 Yanks and a jerk. His co-pilot glanced over. "You ready for this, Captain?" Jimmy's hands were steady, but his heart was hammering. "As ready as I'll ever be, Lieutenant." 4 massive engines roared to life. The bomber shuddered, rolled forward, faster, faster, then lifted into gray clouds. As they crossed the English Channel, Jimmy looked down at the cold, dark water. So many planes had gone down there. So many men lost. Into the flak. Germany. The moment they crossed into enemy airspace, everything changed. Flak. Anti-aircraft fire. Black puffs of smoke erupting all around them. Boom, boom, boom. Each explosion shook the aircraft. Shrapnel tore through aluminum. "Stay in formation. Tight formation." Jimmy's voice was calm on the radio. But inside, his mind was screaming. This was real. No stunt coordinators. No special effects. Just death hunting them through the sky. A bomber to their left took a direct hit, an instantaneous fireball, then debris spinning, falling, burning. They pressed on. "Bombardier, targets acquired." "Yes, sir." "Bombs away." The B-24 lurched upward as tons of bombs dropped free. Below, the docks erupted in fire. The return flight was just as dangerous. A German Me-109 fighter made a pass, traces streaking past the cockpit. Their gunner opened fire. The fighter peeled off. Finally, they crossed back over the English Channel. England appeared. Home. Jimmy brought the bomber in for landing. They rolled to a stop. His co-pilot turned to him. "Sir, you okay?" Jimmy nodded slowly. Yeah, I'm okay." But he wasn't. Not really. He had just seen men die. And he would see it again and again. Act 4, The Weight of Command. The missions multiply. Mission after mission. Bremen. Ludwigshafen. Frankfurt. Berlin. Each mission was 4 to 8 hours of terror. Freezing cold at altitude, oxygen masks that froze to your face, flak that never stopped, fighters diving out of the sun. Jimmy flew them all. He led from the front. When a mission was particularly dangerous, he climbed into that cockpit. His logbook filled with entries: Mission 7, Emden. Heavy flak. Lost 2 ships. Mission 11, Brunswick. Fighter attacks. Johnson's crew MIA. The cost. The hardest part wasn't the flying. It was the losses. Every time a plane didn't return, Jimmy felt it like a knife to the chest. He knew those men. Had briefed them, trained them, joked with them. He stopped smiling. Stopped sleeping well. One particularly brutal mission in February 1944, the 445th lost 8 bombers in a single day. 80 men. Gone. That evening, Jimmy sat alone in the empty briefing room. The chaplain found him there. Captain Stewart. I sent them up there, Father. I gave the orders. You didn't kill them. The enemy did. Doesn't matter. I'm their commander. Their lives are my responsibility. Yes. And that's why they trust you. To lead them. To bring them home when you can. To honor them when you can't. Jimmy walked to the memorial wall where names were written. All the men from the 445th who had been lost. I won't forget you, he whispered. Any of you. And he never did. Promotion and pressure. March 1944. Jimmy was promoted to major, then lieutenant colonel. With each promotion came more responsibility, planning missions, coordinating entire bombardment groups, making strategic decisions affecting hundreds of men. His superiors tried to ground him. Colonel, you've done enough. You're too valuable to risk. But Jimmy refused. If I'm sending my men into danger, I'm going with them. He had become a legend, not because he was a movie star, but because he was a leader who never asked his men to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Act 5, Berlin. The darkest mission. March 6, 1944. The briefing room fell silent when the target was revealed: Berlin. The heart of Nazi Germany. The most heavily defended city in the world. Young faces paled. They had all heard stories, walls of flak so thick you could supposedly walk on them, hundreds of anti-aircraft guns, Luftwaffe fighters swarming. The commanding general looked at Jimmy. Colonel Stewart, you don't have to fly this one. Jimmy stood. With respect, sir, yes, I do. He turned to his squadron. I know you're scared. Hell, I'm scared too. But we're going to fly tight, watch each other's backs, and hit that target so hard Hitler will feel it in his bunker. Over the heart of darkness. The bomber stream stretched for miles, over 800 aircraft converging on Berlin. As they approached, the flak began. The sky turned black with explosions. Boom boom boom. Shrapnel ripped through wings. Bombers shuddered. A B-17 took a direct hit to the cockpit. The nose disintegrated. The bomber flipped and spiraled into oblivion. Stay in formation. Do not break formation. It was hell. Pure hell. Engine 3 is losing oil pressure. Compensate. Keep her level. German fighters dove through the bomber stream, cannon fire stitching lines of death across the sky. Bombardier, how long? 30 seconds to target. The seconds felt like hours. Bombs away. Below, Berlin erupted. Factories, rail yards, military installations disappearing in rolling clouds of fire. Jimmy banked the formation into a wide turn, still under heavy flak, heading for home. The return. They lost 12 bombers that mission. 120 men. But Jimmy brought his squadron back, all of them. The ground crew counted over 150 holes in his aircraft. The co-pilot climbed out on shaking legs. Sir, how did you stay so calm up there? Jimmy removed his oxygen mask, his face gray with exhaustion. I wasn't calm, son. I was terrified. Every second. Then how? Because they needed me to be calm. That's what command is. You carry the fear so they don't have to. Act 6, the end of war. The final mission. Spring 1945. The war was ending. Allied armies pushed into Germany from all sides. Victory was close. Jimmy Stewart, now a full colonel, had flown 20 combat missions. More than enough to go home with honor. But he volunteered for one more. April 25, 1945. Target, Luftwaffe airfield near Prague. As they flew over Europe, Jimmy looked down at the scarred landscape, cities reduced to rubble, a continent broken by years of war. He thought of all the missions, all the men lost, all the names on the memorial wall. Let this be the last one. Please, God, let this finally end. Bombs away. The airfield below erupted. Mission accomplished. They turned for home. For the last time. Act 7, Coming Home. Return to America. September 1945. The war was over. Colonel James Stewart boarded a transport ship bound for New York. He stood on deck, watching England disappear. He was going home. But he wasn't the same man who had left. The war had carved deep lines into his face, stolen his easy smile, shown him things that would haunt his dreams forever. When the ship docked, crowds were waiting. Bands played, flags waved, flashbulbs exploded. Reporters rushed forward. "Mr. Stewart, are you glad to be back? Tell us about flying bombers." Jimmy stopped and looked at these excited faces. People who had no idea. Who couldn't understand. "I'm glad the war is over," he said quietly. "And I'm grateful to be home." "But what about the missions? The action?" Jimmy's jaw tightened. There was no action. There was just death. And a lot of good men who didn't come back. He walked past them. No more questions. The medals in the drawer. Jimmy returned to Hollywood but didn't make a big deal about his service. He had been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross with 2 oak leaf clusters, the Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, the French Croix de Guerre, and 7 battle stars. He put them all in a drawer. Never displayed them. Never bragged about them. When people asked about the war, he deflected. "I just did my job. Like everyone else." But the truth was, he couldn't talk about it. The nightmares were enough. Waking in cold sweats, hearing the roar of engines, the explosion of flak, the screams of dying men. His friends noticed. "Jimmy's different. He doesn't laugh like he used to." But Jimmy never talked about it. He carried it alone. Finding purpose again. Jimmy struggled to find his place in Hollywood. The scripts felt trivial. The glamour felt empty. But slowly, he found his way back through stories that mattered. In 1946, he made It's a Wonderful Life, the story of George Bailey, a man who thinks his life has no meaning, only to discover he's touched countless others. Jimmy poured his soul into that role. All his pain, all his doubt, all his search for purpose. The film wasn't a hit when released. But over the years, it became a classic, a reminder that one life matters. That service matters. That sacrifice matters. The unspoken legacy. Jimmy Stewart continued acting for decades. He became even more beloved, but different. There was depth now. Gravity. A sense that this man had seen things, endured things, understood things. He never sought glory for his military service. When interviewers asked about the war, his answer was always the same. "I just did my duty. The real heroes are the ones who didn't come back." He meant it. He kept in touch with families of men from his squadron who had been killed. Wrote letters to their mothers and wives. Attended reunions. Always honoring them. Always remembering. When younger actors asked about the war, he would simply say, "I hope you never have to know what it's like. But if you do, remember why you're fighting. Remember who you're protecting. And bring your people home." Closing, the man behind the legend. James Stewart died in 1997 at the age of 89. His funeral was attended by thousands, actors, directors, fans, and veterans. So many veterans. Old men in their 70s and 80s, former bomber crews who had served with him in the 445th, stood in their old uniforms, saluting. Because to them, Jimmy Stewart wasn't just a movie star. He was their commander. The man who had led them through hell. The man who had refused special treatment. The man who had earned his wings the hard way. The man who had walked toward danger, just as his father had told him to. Final reflection. Jimmy Stewart's story is not just about fame or movies. It's about courage. About leadership. About sacrifice. About a man who had everything, fame, fortune, comfort, safety, and chose to risk it all because he believed in something greater than himself. He could have stayed in Hollywood, made patriotic films from the safety of a soundstage, sold war bonds, entertained troops. All honorable ways to serve. But Jimmy Stewart didn't want the easy path. He wanted to stand with his generation. To face the same dangers. To earn the right to call himself a veteran. And in doing so, he became more than an actor. More than a celebrity. He became a hero. Not because of what he did on screen, but because of what he did when the cameras stopped rolling. When the real world called. When his country needed him. He answered. And that, more than any Oscar, any accolade, any role, is what made Jimmy Stewart immortal. Not as George Bailey. Not as Jefferson Smith. But as Colonel James Maitland Stewart. Bomber pilot. Leader. American.